Hi, I'm Maryellen, and welcome to our Gold Circle conversation. I'm joined today by Emily, Sadie, and Allison.
In this conversation, we talk about our advocacy victories from 2019 and what you can see coming up in the future from Congress in 2020.
We talk about our Ramsay Research Grant Program and the awards we gave in 2019, as well as our registry and a sneak peek at our symptom tracking app.
We're so excited about the progress we've made so far this year and the ongoing initiatives that we have, and we look forward to telling you more about it.
All of this is made possible by your generosity, and today on Giving Tuesday, we're thrilled to announce a triple match for all giving between now and December 31st. You make a difference, and thank you for supporting Solve M.E.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for the Solve M.E. CFS Initiative Gold Circle conversation this afternoon. My name is Emily Taylor. I'm the Director of Advocacy and Community Relations, and today I'm also your moderator. So I'm just going to give us a quick review of how this webinar is going to work. So we're so excited to have you, and please, we hope that you will consider this an opportunity to really interact with your team here at Solve M.E. CFS Initiative. So we encourage your questions. This is an interactive presentation. In order to ask a question, you'll see a question box in the right-hand corner of your screen on your webinar control menu. You can use that question box to type in your question, and as soon as you hit send, we will see it. And we will get to as many questions as we can at the end of our short little presentation. We will be recording this webinar, and it will be available for those who were unable to join us because they were too ill or had another conflict at this time. And just quick reminder, we're unable to provide medical or legal advice. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our interim CEO and president, Maryellen Gleason.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to people around the world who are joining us today for our special Gold Circle Conversation webinar. As you all know, our steady mission is to make ME/CFS widely understood, diagnosable, and treatable. All of us here at Solve are committed to making that mission a reality. Before I turn our session to Sadie, Allison, followed by Emily, I'd like to welcome back some of our most loyal supporters here today watching our special Gold Circle webinar. I'd also like to greet some newcomers who are first-time Gold Circle Conversation attendees, and welcome. Thanks to everyone for investing in Solve and our programs. It's not by accident that we're having today's Gold Circle conversation on Giving Tuesday, and we are announcing today a triple match for gifts between now and December 31st. Your donations are funding breakthroughs with our Ramsey Grant Program, our U+Me Registry and Biobank, and fuel our footsteps through the halls of power in Washington, D.C. on Advocacy Day, and make possible all the educational tools that we provide for people with ME/CFS and their loved ones. So without further ado, I'd like to kick off by welcoming our Chief Scientific Officer, Dr. Sadie Whittaker. Sadie, over to you.
Thanks, Maryellen. Thank you to everybody for joining today. We're going to talk to you a little bit about what the work that we're doing in research and some of the things we're really excited about, including our Ramsey Program and our registry. So we wanted to kick things off by just talking about how the work we do to achieve our mission. So we're working holistically, and that means we're advancing research, we're also doing advocacy, and we're doing disease education. And we're doing that through programs that build fundamental capacity. So we're trying to establish an infrastructure that will enable not just us to make progress with this disease, but everybody working in this field. So that plays out kind of in the bullets that you see underneath the banner. So we're actively creating an ME/CFS research workforce through our Ramsey Grant Program. So this is our program I'm going to talk in more detail about shortly, but these are small one-year grants that we use to bring researchers into the field, make sure they stay engaged, and facilitate them getting larger NIH grants. So it's really building that pipeline of researchers to work in this field. The second area, which I'm also going to talk about in some detail, is this global registry and biobank, and we want this to be a resource for the whole community. And we intend this to allow us to identify subtypes and treatments for the disease. On the advocacy side, which Emily is going to talk about, we're partnering with federal and state government officials, medical leaders, industry leaders, and scientific pioneers to make sure that there is policies, funding, and action to defeat ME/CFS. And last, we support individuals and their caregivers with this disease through education and outreach. So we're proud of the work we do, and I'm going to talk in some detail now about the research program. So we'll start with the Ramsey Program. If you look on the left-hand part of this slide to begin with, this program was initiated in 2016. And again, it's intended to bring people into the field of ME/CFS and keep them engaged. So these are small grants given for 1 year. We're funding projects that interrogate all scientific models of ME, and we'll show you some details of that in a subsequent slide. And to date, we've awarded over $800,000 in funding for pilot studies over 4 program cycles. We just announced our 2019 Ramsey Program about 6 weeks ago, and we're going to talk in some detail about the awards that were given for this year. I think perhaps the most exciting statistic is that from projects funded over the first 2 cycles of the program, and this is where we believe that we can measure this from, right? So this is 2016 and 2017. So the projects were conducted in the 2016 to 2018 time period. From those projects, initial data that was generated out of them, the program has yielded a 6-fold ROI through NIH funding. So it's a very powerful program, small grants, but very powerful in being able to bring people into the field and to leverage the data generated to get large amounts of NIH funding. If you can direct your eyes to the right-hand side of this slide, this is basically the program, the research program by the numbers. So we funded 23 original projects. We have 62 investigators and research collaboratives in the Ramsey network. We have 12 experienced researchers working in other fields who have newly applied their expertise to ME/CFS. So these are people maybe who study immunology, but in the cancer space, or similar things like that. And we've been able to attract them to this program and apply that expertise to ME/CFS, which is really important. 17 of the projects have involved early stage researchers. Again, this is really important, and because we know that people who start to research ME/CFS earlier in their career are more likely to stay in the field for a longer period of time. And that was highlighted at the NIH conference in April of this year. Dr. Jared Younger, who was one of our 2016 Ramsey awardees, recently received a $2.9 million grant to look at neuroimaging. And then Daiwei Lee, who was a 2018 awardee, got a small grant, but still fairly substantial, $70,000 from the NIH based on data generated through the Ramsey grant. I'd say the last thing to say about this, we have a very robust peer review process for the grant program. So the applications are reviewed by researchers and clinicians, and we implemented a rule in 2018 that we needed to have at least 2 patients integrated into the peer review process. So these are patients who have knowledge of the scientific models of this disease and obviously are able to review these proposals in a rigorous way. But we felt like it was important that the research was being informed by people who are living with this disease. So the next slide talks a little bit about all of the projects that we've funded. So I think the thing to highlight here is we don't believe that there is a single hypothesis yet to explain this disease. And because of that, we fund in multiple areas of science. So you can see that the buckets here, so genetics and heritable factors, we have 4 projects, the microbiome, pathogen-host interactions, we have 5 projects, immune system disturbances over on the right, as well as the interaction between the immune system and metabolism. We have a number of projects that look at neurology, autonomic and circulatory abnormalities. And you see in there we have 2 provocation or exercise studies that are really looking at the impact of exercise on patients. So it's a widespread, but it's by design, right? So this represents 4 cycles of the program from 2016 to 2019. And this is by design, that we don't believe there's a single hypothesis. So we want to fund research that interrogates multiple areas of science. And the green stars that you see, those are the two projects I mentioned on the previous slide where NIH funding has been gained through data generated from the Ramsey Program. So I'm going to hand it over to Allison. She's going to talk a little bit about the 2019 program, including some things we did a little bit differently this year to try and attract both more researchers and researchers outside of the field, currently outside of the field. And she's going to talk through that as well as some of the projects that were funded.
Thanks, Sadie. So as Sadie mentioned, one of the major goals of the program is to attract new researchers to the field and keep them engaged. And so as we were designing the application process this year, we really wanted to lean in on outreach. And so the first thing we did around really proactive outreach was we looked at partnering with the NIH. They helped push the announcement out over their own listserv. In addition, we reached out to professional societies like the Society for Neuroscience, the Society of Immunologists, and we asked them to put that announcement on their calendars and push it out to their members. And we also tried to really steward some researchers that we know of who aren't currently actively involved in the field and to try and really encourage them to apply. And in fact, there were a number that didn't make the 2019 deadline, but that we already have on a running list for next year of, I think it's at least 5 or 6 researchers who couldn't apply, a number of whom are new to the field. In addition to that, we also developed a sort of quick start toolkit. When someone is new to this field and they start to get oriented to it, it's really a massive amount of complexity and information with this disease. The research landscape is big, as you saw on the previous slide. There are a number of scientific areas. And so we came up with a toolkit that gave a good overview of the research landscape by area. It also provided information on different resources that researchers could tap into, including the UK ME Biobank, which has really well characterized samples, as well as our own biobank that was established in 2010. Additionally, it gave the common data elements that NIH pushed out. And all of that was just to give someone a little bit extra boost when they're starting to put together a proposal, both to make it seem more tenable for them and also to ensure that the research proposals that we received were of high quality, making sure that an appropriate research case definition was used, for example. And so we were really pleased to develop that, and we think it was well received. A couple of other things we wanted to highlight as part of this slide was that we did receive the most number of applicants in the 2019 cycle. And we also learned a number of lessons for the next cycle that we think we can really aggressively increase the number of applications that come in. Additionally, which was really exciting, was that we had the highest average peer review scores for the proposals this year. We had one that was so enthusiastically reviewed by some really intense, we get a really impressive panel of reviewers lined up, and there were some pretty hard-hitting ones that reviewed one very, very highly in particular, but all of them had really, really incredible scores, so we were really excited about that. Additionally, this year was the highest dollar amount, so we funded the biggest amount of initial projects, 7 total, and we funded them at the highest levels we've ever done before because they were of such high caliber. And then finally, another thing to emphasize is that we, you can see on the slide here that it says 30 investigators and collaborators are part of this particular Ramsey class. Previous to the 2019 class, we had about 32 researchers and scientific collaborators involved. And so 2019 alone doubled the amount of researchers in the Ramsey network. And we think that was largely due to some of the outreach that we did. And in addition, we had a collaborative carve out in the application process, which was we put within the language of our RFA that we were looking for collaborative proposals. And we received 3 total that were really highly scored, and we ended up funding all of them. And so that kind of supercharged the numbers of researchers that we had in this class. And so we have a total now of like around 62, which is really great. Finally, just one other thing to mention about the toolkit we produced. We were really pleased to see that a number of the priority areas of research that we outlined in that toolkit, for example, including provocation studies, so including an exercise protocol that would help a researcher more deeply interrogate PEM, that was reflected in the proposals we received. You know, we have 2 studies here that are listed, the one that says brain perfusion changes in CFS before and after exercise, as well as the one above it, parsing PEM. Both of those include exercise protocols. Additionally, each one of these proposals had to include a case definition with post-exertional malaise as a requirement. That was something that we outlined in our toolkit. And I think at least 2 of these proposals have biosamples from the UK NE Biobank. And so we were pleased to see some of the pull-through that came from that toolkit. And so I'm not going to speak to these individually, but just as a general point, as Sadie mentioned, we are funding across multiple scientific areas of interest in ME/CFS. That's reflected in this cohort as well. The picture that you see there is of Bruno Peva and his team. They're the ones that are looking at a possible class 2 MHC deficiency, which is a specific immunological pathway that's foundational for acquired immunity, essentially. And so he was a collaborative proposal across 2 different institutions. This is just a slice of the investigators working with him. That's his flow cytometry core investigators, but he's also working with medical students and an immunologist at the London School. And so that kind of just reflects the spirit of Ramsay in that one, photo.
Thanks, Allison. So now we have the biggest collection ever, right? We have 62 researchers. So how do we both encourage collaboration and do things to make sure that our researchers stay engaged, feel connected, feel like they're part of a larger movement so that they want to stay in this field? So we have a number of things that we're implementing. We have a regular call. So every quarter we do a call with all of the Ramsay researchers. It's kind of like a virtual lab meeting. We have a guest speaker. So the last call we had Joe Breen from NIH talking about approaches to apply for NIH funding. And then we have the researchers share methodologies, samples, some of the work that they've been doing. So it's just really a connection point. We're also in the process of setting up a Slack channel so that people can communicate in real time. And then kind of our big push is the Ramsay Grant Conference in 2020. So this is where we would bring everybody together to share their data, both positive data and negative data, because I think most people on this call are aware that negative data can be just as important in telling a story as positive data. The goal is really to increase collaboration. And so at the end of kind of the more of the presentation and Q&A discussion part of the meeting, we'll spend a portion of the meeting workshopping and working on collaborative NIH grant proposals. So an output from this meeting is to actually have the outline of some NIH grants from these researchers. I won't spend too much time on this slide, but needless to say, we've had a lot of positive responses about the Ramsay Grant Program. It's recognized that there is this gap and unmet need in the scientific community. You see a quote there from Jared, who got the $2.9 million NIH grant, as well as a quote from Court Johnson from Health Rising and Professor Lubov Nathanson, who also got a Ramsay grant. So we believe that it really fills an unmet need, and we'd like to, continue to grow this program in scope, as well as make sure that we continue to push people towards applying for bigger and bigger grants to increase the dollars coming into this field. So I'm going to pivot now to the Registry and Biobank. This is a quote from Dr. Camille Birch. So Camille is an individual with ME/CFS, and she's also a researcher, and she was a 2018 Ramsay Grant awardee. And so we asked her, for the website that we're developing for the registry, we asked her to submit a quote to us. And I think this really speaks to the value of what we believe the registry is going to bring. So, everybody living with this disease is an individual. That means their genetic composition, environmental exposures, personal experiences, they have a unique profile. And so being able to understand all of these facets, to look at each individual as an individual, but also how those individuals maybe subtype and start to group with other individuals, will really help us drive progress. And that's the vision behind the registry. So for the next couple of slides, I'm going to talk a little bit about the registry. I feel very strongly that a global registry is going to be the most impactful driver of progress in this disease. If any of you have heard me speak before, you'll know that I come from an oncology background, and the impact of large data sets in oncology has been profound. So breast cancer used to be a single disease, and now it's acknowledged that it's, probably 10 or 12 different diseases, and being able to identify those subtypes based on the characteristics of the disease and the genetic profile has enabled researchers to develop treatments that work exquisitely well in those specific subtypes. And so I think bringing that big data vision to ME/CFS is going to have a major impact on what we learn about that disease, and how we can start to develop treatments. So I'm going to talk a little bit through this slide. So the Registry and Biobank, it's to just explain a little bit about what it is. It's a collection of both patient-reported data as well as biospecimens like blood, from which we can understand the genetics from people with the disease as well as healthy controls, so that we can have that comparison. So I'll walk from left to right on this slide. To participate in the registry, you'll sign up and you'll complete a series of surveys on the computer, including medical history, co-occurring conditions, symptoms, medications, and quality of life. I'll touch a little bit on medications for a minute. One of the things that we think is going to be really powerful with the registry is the ability to understand who's taking what medications, what's worked for what people, and why. We all know that certain people respond to rituximab, for example, but when they did a large study, it didn't show an impact. And I think the belief is that the treatment effect is being diluted by people who respond and people who don't. So one of the things that we hope to get from this registry is information around that. Once that information has been entered in the computer, you'll get a link to download an app that I'm going to talk about on the next slide. I mentioned we'll collect biological specimens, and these will be from people with a confirmed case as well as healthy controls. And then I just wanted to touch on the fact that when we were creating the registry, we wanted to do it with people who would be using it. So we spent a fair amount of time speaking to individuals with the disease, conducting surveys, one-on-one interviews, speaking to researchers, caregivers, clinicians, so that the data capture was going to be relevant. It was going to be the kind of data that patients wanted to capture and the kind of data that researchers would find valuable and useful when conducting studies. So these are some screenshots of the app. You'll see on the left, that's kind of the landing page, and then the next one along is kind of the home page where you capture your general wellness score. That's what that 45 is. And then the track screen will lead you to that last screen where you'll capture information on your symptoms, and then you'll be able to plot the data. The next slide is just a video walkthrough of the app, which hopefully Emily's going to click on. We might not be able to get it to work.
No, it just worked before.
So you see the images on the left are some of the images from our desktop portal. So this is when you go in, how are you feeling today? And you fill up your score, and then you go to the symptom screen. You'll see the sliders. You can indicate the severity of your symptoms, or you can also remove or reorder the symptoms if they're not relevant to you. We're going to capture information on life events, so stress, socializing, hours of sleep, number of hours of feet on the floor. We'll also collect information around pregnancy and menstrual cycle, because we know that can have an impact in some people. And then there is a journaling function where you can enter information about how you're feeling or that's relevant to you, and that will be tagged and associated with specific days. And when Allison was making this video, she thought it would be a good idea to put a lot of text in, but when you're watching the video, it's a bit long. Sorry. So that's kind of a sneak peek of the app, the data entry. This is the calendar function where you can go back into a specific day retrospectively and see how your symptoms were, and also enter it if you haven't already. And then this is how to do the tracking. So you're tracking for the whole of the month. You pick the symptoms that you want to track, and then it populates a graph. So you're able to see, you're able to check your symptoms over time, as well as your general wellness score and your step count.
And Sadie, if I can ask a question,
Sure.
This is Emily, by the way. This seems like such an amazing functionality. Is this something that patients can also share with their doctors and their medical team to be able to demonstrate their symptoms over time?
Yeah, so it's not currently integrated with electronic health records, because that's incredibly complex and time consuming, but it's certainly something that you could take on your phone and show to your family, your caregivers, and your physician and medical team, so that you're not only capturing how you feel at that moment of the doctor's appointment or trusting your memory, you can actually show some real data as to how you felt over time.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. So this is our last slide. So it was, in this vision of big data, what does big data mean? It means the largest possible data set that can be acquired. And so we didn't want to create a siloed registry and biobank, because that defeats the purpose. So we've been working to collaborate globally with people either who have a registry up and running, or with people who are planning to start a registry. So we have a deep partnership with the UK London School Cure M.E group, and we've been working collaboratively with them on the design of our registry as well as our app, and looking at ensuring that our data collection processes are closely aligned so that we can share data on the back end. And then similarly with Australia, they're getting ready to establish a registry and biobank. They're going to use our infrastructure, and we're going to work with them again to align data elements, and similarly with Canada. So I think everyone's pretty excited about the ability to track longitudinally via the app. And so it's really ignited our ability to create this global collaborative approach to data collection, with the end result being that we have this massive data set where we can really start to subtype, understand specific characteristics of subtypes of this disease, that will hopefully lead to either which existing treatments work for certain populations, or identify new treatments. So those are the end of the research slides, and I think Emily's now going to give a presentation on some of the advocacy work.
Thank you so much, Sadie. It's a real pleasure to be able to speak with you all today. And I wanted to talk about two things in particular. First, what we saw this past year in our advocacy work, and secondly, where we intend to go in the upcoming year. So for those of you who are not familiar with our advocacy program, which started just about 2.5 years ago, and we're about halfway through a 5-year plan. We do have a multi-year advocacy strategy, which in the past 2.5 years has really been focused on building the foundations of strong relationships, seats at the table, and coalition building that will now evolve and leverage in the future for real strong outcomes. We have 4 key advocacy goals as dictated by our board, and those include expand and accelerate research investment, expedite government response to the ME/CFS public health crisis, increase the quality and accessibility of clinical care and patient support, and of course, lastly, raise awareness and improve understanding of ME/CFS. So some key milestones that we saw this year in alignment with those goals. Probably our biggest success this year took place in the appropriations process, which is the budgeting process for the federal government. This year, we not only prevented the elimination of the ME/CFS program, which has been an ongoing challenge. It's the first year that we've been flat funded, meaning we were not eliminated in both the House and the Senate, which is really exciting. And the biggest win we had this year was opening up new Department of Defense funding. This has been a 2-year effort by Solve M.E, and we spearheaded it last year, fell short, but this year we made it across the finish line, fingers crossed, assuming we have a budget this year. But as the budget is currently written and not yet passed, we have $350 million in the congressionally directed medical research program that is now open and available for ME/CFS researchers to apply for. So that's really exciting. And we've been collaborating very closely together, Allison, Sadie, and I, in keeping them up to date on this process so that we can work very closely with not just with legislators, but with the researchers, so that they understand this new bucket of funding is available and we can help them put together grant proposals that are more compelling to this different department. Very excited about that. We've cultivated bipartisan House and Senate champions, which have stood by us through thick and thin for a lot of different efforts. And of course, the expansion of the federal programs, as I mentioned. And what we're really excited about is that we're seeing more broad-based support than we ever had before. We actually had, I think there's a typo on this slide, we actually had 64 members of Congress from both parties and both chambers support our appropriations request this year. That's the largest that we've ever had come together in a single action. The previous record was set 2 years before that with 55. So we're really just making such progress, and there's a lot of interest in and follow up in Capitol Hill. The members of staff I speak to are just constantly interested in our work, particularly in our science. And it's really a pleasure to be that bridge between the scientific community, the patient community, and our halls of power. So looking forward to where we're, I also forgot to mention, oh my goodness, this keeps living. We also had a unanimously passed Senate resolution honoring ME/CFS Awareness Day in May. And that was a huge victory, and especially considering how that was another 2-year initiative that took 2 years to get across the floor. And it came at such an important time in the budget process, because I think it really did help us push us over the finish line for those different budget pieces. Obviously, our big kind of centerpiece event, if you haven't heard of it before, you're going to hear about it now, is Solve M.E. Advocacy Day. This year, or next year, oh my goodness, it's almost 2020 already. We're going to be on the Hill on April 21st. In 2020, we're looking to get 200 folks to come to DC. Last year we had 174, so we're looking to break that record. This is just such a special event for so many reasons, and it really gives me a lot of joy to share it with you. I hope you'll be interested in joining us in Washington, DC if you're able. It's where we take members of our community, both researchers, advocates, patients who are so sick, and their caregivers, and we get them to sit down one-on-one with their members of Congress and staff. And there really is nothing more powerful than looking someone in the eye and describing your experience. And we've really seen tangible results from this event. You know, we go back to the members of staff, appropriations committees, and those folks remember these visits. They may not remember the exact name or context of the person they spoke to, but they remember the stories. And we're definitely seeing an evolution in our treatment and perception on Capitol Hill as a result of these meetings. So we're not going to let those up anytime soon. Very excited to keep going. And so for the folks just on this call, this is not public information yet, but I will share a little bit of what the shape of the events in Washington, DC next year will look like. We're going to continue with the Empower ME workshop and roundtable. For those who attended last year, it was our first inaugural event, and it was so successful with so many positive comments, we had to bring it back. So this is a 2-part workshop really designed for patients and caregivers that tackles in a very in the trenches mechanisms of how to address key problems that you experience in your day-to-day life with ME/CFS. So last year we focused on self-representation in the doctor's office and in your family. And this year we're looking to start, we haven't confirmed it yet, but we're going to do disability access. So both in the government sector for public disability like SSDI, and in the private sector for disability access like ERISA. We're really excited to bring that back. Following the Empower ME workshop and event, we will have our traditional training, which happens in the evening, so that folks who have never come to Capitol Hill before still feel like they have the tools in their toolkit on how to have those conversations with Congress and their staff. And then the following day, we're on the Hill all day. It goes from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. But what we're excited to add this year, which we haven't had in the past, is on Wednesday, April 22nd, we will actually have a special presentation at the NIH, where we have a number of scientists, including our own Dr. Sadie Whittaker, who will be presenting on some of the updates in the field, and then we'll have a reception at the NIH. What makes this really special is it's an opportunity for scientists, members of the patient community, and NIH staff to all get together in one environment, hear the same material, talk to each other, make those connections. And we really think, just like it's important to lobby Congress and get face-to-face with those stories, the NIH is no different, and we're excited to expand Advocacy Day to include the NIH on that Wednesday. So our key targets coming up for the next year, obviously appropriations will continue to be a major target for us. We are still absolutely dedicated to getting additional funding for our one line item at the CDC, in addition to set aside funding at the NIH. We are not going to back down on those goals. We're going to keep trying. But we are also looking at other avenues and approach, and we have a couple vehicles, including a supplements bill that Representative McGovern is sponsoring, and also the 21st Century Cures Act 2.0. We've been in some initial conversations with coalitions around getting ME/CFS expanded coverage in that legislation as well. So we're looking for multiple vehicles in addition to, of course, appropriations where the money is, and we hope to have some really big results for you next year.
Thank you, Emily, for sharing our triple match announcement today, and we're very excited. It's we've seen a significant level of participation even within the hour that we put that email out there. So thank you, everyone out there, for that participation. So before we take questions, I really am grateful to everyone on the call, and additionally the visionary and knowledgeable colleagues I have here at Solve M.E, and we're really delighted to be able to share the kind of knowledge that they bring here today. So Emily, do you want to take over on our Q&A?
Absolutely. So now would be the opportunity for you to ask your questions. If you haven't already, please take a moment to find the questions box on your webinar panel, which should usually live on the right-hand side of your screen. If you have any questions that for either myself, so Sadie or Allison or Maryellen, feel free to type them into the box, and we'll get to them as soon as they come in.
So while we're waiting for some questions, I'm sure everyone is familiar with this, but since there may be a life beyond with our webinar, how do people sign up for the registry?
So there's a link, and we will have a microsite that we can also send the link out to, where there's plenty of buttons that say join the registry on various pages. But in the interim, we have a pre-registration link that we can send out to participants of this call and whoever else wants to hear about it. We're also trying to encourage healthy controls to sign up. So if you're able to send the link to your friends and family, that would be really helpful as well.
And there's no cost to be in the registry,
free,
right?
Yeah. And the use of the app will be free.
Another example of how our Gold Circle supporters enable these kinds of programs for Solve.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple questions are coming in. So one question is specifically about the registry. There's been a lot of concerns in the news lately about data privacy.
Mm-hmm.
What is the registry doing to protect people's data, and how is the data shared out once it's in?
So obviously the registry is completely HIPAA compliant. It's also GDRC compliant, which is the European kind of regulations around data privacy, which is the most stringent of all the regions. So the data capture is obviously very well regulated. The registry itself will be approved by Western IRB. So the process of data collection will be closely reviewed and monitored. And then in terms of sharing the data out, researchers will have to become pre-vetted. So there'll be a peer review panel made up of researchers, clinicians, and patients who review requests for data access. And based on whether it's just data or whether it's data and biospecimens, there'll be certain information that needs to be provided to that committee who will review the request and share that data, share a login with that researcher who then logs into a private access portal to access the data.
And then a follow-up question is the panel that reviews that, does that include patients as well?
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
Yeah, and just in addition to that, as Sadie mentioned, there'll be that researcher access. They'll only ever see anonymized data. So even the data center that they use to query data will only ever see anonymized data, just to underscore that point.
Absolutely. So we have another question coming in. Since the patient app seems like it would require a fair amount of energy to use, are patients expected to fill it out every day, and how long do the questions continue for?
So it's really patient driven. So I think the default is we're asking if people can fill it in every 3 days. But there's an ability to change how frequently you populate that information. And we did bear the burden in mind when we were creating the app. So we actually you only have to fill in information on 5 symptoms. So there's kind of a bare minimum requirement where we're asking if every 3 days you could populate information on 5 kind of core symptoms for this disease. If you do nothing else, the rest of the functionality is really for the patient to use and individualize as they see fit. But if 3 days is still too frequent for you, you can change the period of data entry to whatever suits your needs. In terms of how long you're expected to do it for, it's really indefinite period, but you can define that for yourself. So if you only want to do it for a short period of time, you have that option as well.
Wonderful. So thank you all for the questions. They're coming in fast and furious. So we're going to stick with the questions for the registry for the time being, and then we'll shift over to the advocacy questions. So sticking with the registry, some patients have a number of comorbid conditions. I know my mom is one of those. Are patients with multiple diagnoses accepted into the registry, and are there age limits on the registry?
Yes, multiple diagnoses are accepted into the registry. In fact, I think we all know that a lot of people have, fibromyalgia and ME/CFS or Lyme and multiple different comorbidities. And eventually, we're actually going to open up the registry for people who are diagnosed with Lyme or fibro, because it's likely that what's going to end up happening is that these names that we've put on these diseases may not be quite as accurate. And when you start to get a large data set and you can actually group people by their symptoms and their genetic profiles, it may end up that, if you kind of take those names away, you may end up with more similarities between a patient, say, who's been classified as ME/CFS and one with Lyme. So we're absolutely welcoming people with comorbidities, and there are no age limits.
Except just for 13 years of age and older.
Oh,
there's a lower limit.
There's a lower age limit.
But yeah.
Oh, no, I'm glad you mentioned that, because 13 years of age is, when you start getting into the pediatric cases. Are there plans in the future to maybe expand into pediatric research in the registry, or is
Yeah, absolutely. We consulted Peter Rowe on our research advisory council, gave us some really great insight into how we might do tailored data capture for the pediatric population.
And obviously the pediatric data capture is subject to a carve out within the IRB application because of the sensitivities of enrolling people who are under the age of 18.
Absolutely, I can imagine. So I think that wraps up some of the questions on the registry. If you have any more questions, please feel free to pop them into your question box on your right-hand side. I'm getting a couple of questions on advocacy. So the first, someone asked for a little bit more detail on the 21st Century Cures 2.0. And this is something that I don't want to talk too out of school about because it's not final and everything's very much up in the air. But there are 2 areas in particular that we're looking to partner on a future piece of legislation on 21st Century Cures 2.0, because as you know, the previous version passed last year and is still or year before last, and is an implementation process. One of the areas that I particularly am really interested in is there was a subclause of the 21st Century Cures Act specifically for disease natural history study. It was a grant program out of the FDA, which I know I can imagine people are cringing as they hear that. The FDA historically has not been great to us, but they're just executing this particular grant program, not in specifically overseeing. And that particular program had about $6 million per disease as a grant to explore natural history. And that's something that they itemized, I think it was 8 different diseases in the previous version. And we're very active in conversations to try to get ME/CFS listed as one of the diseases for natural history study in the next version of the bill. Secondarily, 21st Century Cures did a lot of health data oversight and had some different, especially about electronic health records. And that's something obviously with the registry, there's a lot of conversations there. And then last the FDA medical device tax is something that was a big part of the 20th Century Cures Act. It's nothing that directly works with people with ME/CFS. Obviously, we don't generally have medical devices, but they are talking about expanding it into supplements and some of the supplement quality control. And that is something that I think the ME/CFS community is very interested in, because I know many of our community members, and my mom included, rely on supplements that get them through the day, and the quality control on that and future studies of impact on supplements is something that we've been in conversations with our coalition members about. So that's a little bit more about that. I also got a question specifically about the hotel info for Advocacy Day. We are in negotiation with a couple different locations. One of the big complaints we had about Advocacy Day last year was that the cost of the hotel was high. That was because we were partnering with the NIH conference, and part of the hotel block was made available for that purpose. We're hoping to get out of the expensive neighborhoods of Bethesda and into some more reasonably priced hotels. And of course, as always, there are travel awards available for patients who need a little financial assistance to help get to ME/CFS Advocacy Week. And we'll be posting information about those on the website as well. So for those of you who are interested, you can go to www.meadvocacyweek.com, just meadvocacyweek.com, and that'll bring you to the page with all the information hosting about information on Advocacy Week. Great. Let's see. I think we touched on most of the questions that came in. Were there any other questions that folks had? We're going to kind of kill a little bit of time. We can type it in the box now. Otherwise, we'll slide over to Maryellen to wrap up.
Well, in fact, we only have a few minutes left, so we could probably entertain one more question from our loyal audience. Let me see any more, Emily, that might be.
No more have
Okay.
popped in. I think we got to all of them.
Great.
And thank you so much for the very kind comments that you're sharing. We really appreciate them. This team works so hard. I've been really blessed to have worked in a lot of different advocacy and nonprofit organizations. And I will say we have a lot of fun here in the office, but it's a lot of fun born out of a lot of love and a lot of hard work. Everybody here is just dedicated to everything we do here. Oh, one last question just jumped in. For advocacy, should we plan on days beyond the 22nd? At this time, no. The 22nd is the last scheduled event. We will have a reception. The kind of capstone or the ending event will be the reception at the NIH. We're working on some VIPs who might be there. I don't want to spill the beans quite yet until anyone's confirmed. But we're really excited to have that reception at NIH. And again, really trying to be a bridge to integrate the patient experience into research and the researcher experience into government as much as we can. So that should be the last night if you're planning on joining us in April. The 22nd would be the last day.
Well, thank you for that final footnote, Emily, because that's an important one. In terms of our event here today, our seminar, you heard a lot of passion from Allison, Sadie, and Emily, and all of this, of course, could not be possible without all of you. So we again express our appreciation and gratitude for our Gold Circle members for helping us make progress in fighting this disease. So with that, thank you all for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.